question, but there are please written 10 times. Please, please, please make sure that you get this question. The gender is also not written, it is only written Sony. And it says, democracy of love is adultery. Do you agree with above statement? Yes, no.
Democracy?
Democracy of love is adultery. Do you agree with above statement? Yes or no?
It needs some thought. Democracy of love would mean presumably that everybody has an equal chance at getting love. Is that adultery? That would mean, I suppose, that just as you vote for one political party in a democracy, and the next election you vote for another political party, which is unfaithful and therefore, I suppose, like adultery. No, I think adultery should not be used in this context for a very simple reason. Adultery happens after you take on a solemn commitment of marriage. And as long as you are in a marriage, then you don't have the right to indulge in what you may call the democracy of love. And therefore, that would be adultery. But as long as you're not married, you are free to love, and by all means, enjoy your democracy.
Sir, the last question, or probably the second last, Mr. J.R.D. Tata used to say, I don't want India to become an economic superpower. I want India to become a happier country in the world. Sir, what's your take on that? The question comes from Vishnu Patidar, PIMR.
Right, Vishnu, it's a good question, and there is actually a serious amount of research and writing taking place in this idea, which was formally advanced and adopted by our neighbor Bhutan. Bhutan said gross domestic product is a useless measurement, that there's no point just measuring economic activity and saying a country is richer because of that. You should measure gross national happiness. And Bhutan says, and in fact, there's one very interesting thought, which environmentalists have talked about. If you go and chop down a forest of trees and chop it into timber and sell the timber, you're actually raising your GDP. Because by chopping down the thing, you're employing the choppers, the woodcutters, the truck drivers who are transporting it, you're spending money on petrol, then you're taking it to market, you're converting it into planks or furniture, you're then selling it, you're making money of that. All of that makes your GDP go really up. But you've destroyed a forest. You've destroyed all the possibility of better ozone, of animals and birds living in that forest, the pleasure children got from running through it. So is that the correct measurement of what is the right thing to do? It's a very intelligent question. So the notion of gross national happiness says no, we won't measure economic activity in dollar terms as the be-all and end-all of our GDP. We will measure how people are content. Do they find fulfillment in life? And out of that fulfillment, are they able to feel happy? The great problem with that, however, is that you're trying to objectively measure something which is a fundamentally subjective feeling. Happiness is subjective. Remember, people say money can't buy you happiness. That's the ultimate proof that you can't measure happiness. Somebody with $1 billion in the bank doesn't feel happy, then how can money buy him happiness or her happiness? So you know that you can't measure happiness. A very poor person may have found the secret of happiness without having monetary advantage. So one could argue there is a very, very good way of looking at it. Whether either is complete in itself can be disputed, but the Bhutanese solution works well for Bhutan. The GDP solution works well for the Western industrialized countries as a measurement. Perhaps reality in India will lie somewhere between the two. If we can both improve our economic activity and learn to find happiness with what we have, with what we are and what we are becoming, that will be the way forward.
Probably the last question, last and half, I just received in BBM also, sir.
Okay.
The last question is your quick take on FDI entry into the country and anti-corruption movement.
Quick on both of those. On FDI, I was designated by the party to be the lead speaker in the parliamentary debate that never happened. So I prepared about 3 hours worth of material on the subject. I'll try and give you the 3-minute version. Very simply, I believe that investing, whether from outside or from inside, but in this case the issue is from outside, would have been wonderful for the Indian consumer and wonderful for the Indian farmer. It would have been rough on the Indian middleman up to a point. To summarize, right now when you buy your sabzi in the bazaar, you are paying 5 times what the farmer gets. That is the average. You're paying 5 times for your aloo or your bengan or whatever, what the farmer has got for growing it. Everything in between has gone to the middleman, or in our case, many middlemen, from the mandi, the wholesaler, the mandi, the distributor, and so on. Now, if you had major professionalized corporate FDI coming in from companies that are used to doing this around the world, have got their systems streamlined, know how to create their supply chains, their distribution, their cold storage, and so on, they will purchase directly from the farmer so they can afford to pay the farmer more than he's getting right now. But by eliminating the middleman, they can sell it to you at a price lower than you're paying right now. So the consumer benefits and the farmer benefits. The striking thing about this, of course, is that 40% of the fruits and vegetables grown in India are wasted every year. 40%. We throw away more food than the entire continent of Australia grows. So in those circumstances, getting in professionalized corporates so that you don't have to throw away a tomato here because it can be put in a cold truck and sold in Calcutta where it's not available, that would transform the lives of farmers. It would overall have a depressive effect on agricultural prices because more food and fruits would be available everywhere. So it's in many ways a no-brainer. But the fact is that the organized opposition of the retailers in between, the middlemen in between, have created a certain problem, and there is a legitimate concern of politicians that the kirane dukan, the mom and pop stores as the Americans call them, will be pushed out of business if wholesalers come. Now that too is actually a misplaced concern, because these big Walmarts and Carrefours and Tesco's and so on, if they come, they will need a large amount of space. It's highly unlikely to be in the heart of a city, because they won't get that kind of land. They will have big facilities with parking and trolleys and so on, and you will have to make a trip there to buy major items that can last in your fridge for a week or two. Once you do that, for your daily replenishments, you will still go to your kirane ka dukan, obviously. And again, they can change their business model. They can stay open longer hours than a Walmart will. They can deliver even small items at home. You suddenly forgot a bar of soap or a toothpaste. They can send a little boy running over to give it to you because they live next door to you, which Walmart will not do. There are various ways in which our mom and pop stores can adjust their business models to actually thrive and flourish. And China, when they went for FDI in retail, the statistics are really revealing, because they are a country in some ways similar to ours. Both the local retailers and the big stores have grown. Nobody has suffered, at least judging by the statistical numbers. So the argument in favor of FDI and retail is very strong. On the corruption issue, the fact is that Anna Hazare has definitely touched a chord amongst millions of people. I'm not surprised that a channel that is actually quite sympathetic to our government named him Indian of the Year yesterday. All of this is not surprising. But I do worry about some aspects of the movement. The first is people who have supported him know what they're against. They're against corruption, and they're right to be against corruption. But do they fully understand what they're for? Have they read the details of his Lokpal bill, which he insists must be adopted without any change in the parliament, to only have it his way? Now there it worries me a great deal, because, there are 2 or 3 fundamental issues that I have as somebody who has tried to understand the pros and cons of the issue. The first is we have been swayed by the media hysteria over the big ticket corruption. The Commonwealth Games scandal, the 1,76,000 crores on the telecoms. Frankly, that's a kind of number it's even difficult for us to understand. I mean, how do you get to 1,76,000 crore? If we put 100 rupee notes in piles, will it fill up the stadium? I don't know. I mean, it's difficult, and it doesn't come out of your or my wallet. It comes out of the ether, out of cyberspace. But the real corruption that hurts most Indians is much more petty and basic. It's when you go to get a driving license and you have to bribe the examiner. It's when you lose a father or a mother and you have to go and get a death certificate before you can do any of the other administrative things, and the fellow won't process it unless you bribe him. Or a pregnant working class woman who goes to a government hospital where she's entitled to get a free bed, and she won't get it without bribing someone, an orderly at least, otherwise she has to deliver her child on the floor. Or the widow who won't get her insurance payment or her pension for her husband without bribing a clerk. I mean, these are the kinds of things that sadly are the real challenges of corruption for the majority of people in India. And those challenges are not going to be met by creating a large supra-institution in Delhi with an army of 20, 30,000 in all the ministries. Rather than, you're still not going to have a Lokpal in every driving license office, in every municipal office, in every hospital. It's not possible. So I'm not sure whether the cure is targeting the right disease. Secondly, whether the Q A might not impede effective government action, because people in ministries might be intimidated and afraid of the Lokpal person parked in the ministry. And you may well find that they become paralyzed in terms of decision making, because bureaucrats by and large follow the principle that you can't be punished for what you haven't done. So the basic principle of most bureaucrats is do as little as possible so that you won't be punished for it. And now that bureaucrats are being punished for merely putting their signatures on files that the ministers wanted them to, now they're going to become even more cautious with it. So that's a second risk, that the cure will be worse than the disease. And the third and biggest problem for me, as somebody who has studied the history of institutions around the world, who has looked at these things, is that this is fundamentally in the Anna Hazare Jan Lokpal Bill version. It is an unaccountable institution that has the power to investigate, prosecute, and punish all in one institution, and covers everybody from the Prime Minister all down. I don't think that version is going to come out finally out of Parliament. But in that version, it reminded me of nothing less than the Spanish Inquisition, which was set up by the Catholic Church in the 1400s, out of the best intentions in the world to promote faith in God and so on, and actually became an instrument of torture and suffering for many people, burning victims at the stake. We don't want the Spanish Inquisition coming out of the best motives that people may have. So we need to tackle corruption, but we need to do a number of things. A Lokpal bill is one thing, and it's got to be better than the one that Anna Hazareji's people are coming forward with, because it must have some checks and balances. And we must support it with more things. The Right to Information Act is important. We must have a whistleblower protection thing so somebody can blow the whistle on corruption without being punished. We must have more transparency in laws so people can understand the laws and others can't exploit the loopholes. We must reduce the discretionary powers of bureaucrats and politicians to allocate things, because if you can allocate things out of turn, that can be monetized. So all of this, there's going to be a whole series of things done to ensure that corruption is reduced. But ultimately, the final thing that must be said was said by Mahatma Gandhi 70 years ago, when he said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Gandhiji understood very fully, even on the issues of corruption, there is corruption because there is both a giver and a taker. We are only looking at the taker. The corrupt person must be punished. But let's all look at ourselves. How many of us can truthfully say we haven't paid a bribe to somebody, that we haven't tried to make a shortcut? Bribe takers exist because bribe givers want shortcuts, they want favors, they want to get something they're not entitled to, they want to avoid punishments that they are deserving of, and so on. And by doing that, they have encouraged and permitted the flourishing of corruption. That is, we have allowed it. The old line that when you point one finger, three are pointing back at you. So I just say to everyone, please remember, if we ourselves don't give, then there'll be nothing for the corrupt to take. That ultimately may be the best solution for our country.
Thank you so much, Dr.